Voting is underway in Kansas as the balance of power in Washington hangs in the balance. The race to fill the seat of retiring U.S. Senator Pat Roberts could be the game changer. Bollier versus Marshall, both national parties are pouring millions of dollars into this race, believing it could make all the difference in determining which party controls the Senate. Who has the right stuff to tackle the tough issues? Give it to you straight and win your vote. We hope the next hour will help you decide. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Susan Peters. Right now, we're going to bring you interviews with Kansas's two U.S. Senate candidates, Congressman Roger Marshall and Democrat State Senator Barbara Bollier. The questions are a combination of those that viewers emailed to KPTS, other journalists, and of course my own that I have gathered from social media that you want answered. First, Barbara Bollier, whose polls indicate may be the most viable Kansas Democrat to run for U.S. Senate since 1932. Thank you very much for being here, Senator Bollier. We really appreciate your half an hour of time. We know a half an hour is a lot of time in this campaign, and we really appreciate you coming on public television and doing this half an hour interview with us.
It's great to be here as always. So thanks for taking the time yourselves, and to those who are listening, isn't it nice to have the opportunity to learn about the candidates?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we've heard a lot of negative advertising, and I'm only going to get into a little bit of that, but a lot of voters have told me we want to get into the issues. So most of this will be about issues and not about the advertising that's been going on. But first of all, I wonder, why did you switch parties 2 years ago?
You know, I grew up a moderate Republican in this state, was first elected that way with Senator Nancy Kassebaum as my incredible role model throughout my life. A woman who put person over party and really represented to all of us how you can work across the aisle. And I'm one of the Kansans that loved Nancy Kassebaum. She's actually endorsed me. Anyway, I was elected, served 11 years in the legislature, and found myself just constantly at odds with my Republican leadership over very things that most Kansans support, expanding Medicaid in this state and fully funding public education. And of course, the horrible round-back tax experiment. And that was a time when I stood up to my party leadership, voted no, hoped I was wrong, wasn't. And then it took Republican moderates and Democrats to come together to end that terrible, horrible fiscal havoc that was wreaked by that plan on our state. And in 2018, Laura Kelly was running for governor, and it was very clear to me, even though I was a Republican, she was the best candidate. And I endorsed her across party lines because I'm always about what's best for the people. Kansans agreed. I realized my values hadn't changed at all at that time. My votes weren't changing, but my party had changed. And I then realized it was time to move to the Democratic side so I could best represent the people of this state. And I am a really proud, pragmatic Democrat now, ready to get to work for the people.
What do you say to voters who say this may be a bad year in Kansas to run for U.S. Senate as a Democrat? Because some voters are saying, I don't care who it is, I do not want the Senate to be controlled by Democrats. And what do you say to those voters who say, that's the reason I'm not going to vote for Barbara Bollier? What would you say to them?
Well, I'm going to be more clear because I'm a positive person. Let's talk about what people are going to vote for. People, no matter what party they are in, I am hearing from the majority of people that they're looking for a U.S. Senator who is willing to work together. And if you look at my logo, you see a red and blue intertwining line. to represent that we are red and we are blue, and that's fine, and we can disagree, but we are supposed to be building something together, just like our DNA, and move forward. So it's not, for me, it's not about what you are, it's what you bring to the table. People are tired of the partisanship and the bickering and fighting. They just want something to get done.
They really are, but even so, there are a lot of voters who would say we can't have a a Democratic controlled Senate and House and presidency, and that's why I have to vote against Barbara. What would you say to them?
You know, I have worked in the political sphere, and integrity and honesty really matter. And the reality is, issues change, but values don't change, and they shouldn't be changing. And I have never been a person that put party first. I've always put the people first. And I think government functions best, particularly the United States Senate. It's been known over the course of history as the place where leaders can put politics aside and figure out and do together what's best for the country. It isn't about party. Again, it's for them, about the people. And we need to get back to that. That's what I'm hearing from Kansans.
And hopefully who's ever in the Senate can get back to that, because I know that is what the American people want. You portray yourself as a moderate, but as a moderate, how do you feel about the Democratic PACs putting $7.5 million into your campaign in Kansas? How do you feel about that?
Let's talk about campaign finance reform, okay? If that's really what you want to talk about, because that's what it's about. And I am fully ready to vote to end Citizens United. I'm endorsed by them, and to stop all this money that people don't necessarily even know where it's from. I am so proud of my campaign. We've raised money from thousands and thousands of Kansans and outraised my opponent in Kansas by thousands of dollars. And that tells me that the people are ready to support me. And, they're going to spend what they spend, but I'm ready to get the money out of this political system and get back to the basics of doing what's right for people.
Well, how do you feel about the Democratic Party being not centered, but putting so much emphasis on this Kansas race? They usually don't, because it's usually the Republicans a shoo-in, but they're putting millions of dollars into this race so that...
They're doing it because they see what a great candidate I am, just like the people do. And, the number one issue for Kansans right now, as is true for people around this country, is health care and health care reform. And I have an opponent that is against having protections for people being covered for their pre-existing conditions, and has voted against that, and has stood firmly against Medicaid expansion, which this state, 80% of the people support. So the Democrats, they're excited. Since 1932, they haven't had a candidate that was going to win, and now they do. Every party supports their candidates. So I'm not really clear on your question, because, Roger Marshall's campaign, he's being, they're having to give him all kinds of support from his party and his people, because he hasn't even raised the support of Kansans for his race.
I asked the question because a lot of voters are reacting to your moderate claim, but saying yet you're so supported by the Democratic Party. And in fact, you voted...
Well, I want to be real clear. I've never been supported. I was a moderate Republican, and the Republican Party never supported me. So I couldn't be prouder that the Democratic Party is recognizing that it is a big group, and that moderates and the moderate voice is very important. And how wonderful for Kansans to know that that moderate moderate viewpoint will be heard in Washington. I think they couldn't be more excited about that. That's why they elected Nancy Kassebaum years ago, and that's why they're going to elect me.
Your opponent says, though, you voted 90% of the time with Democrats when you were in the House and the Senate. Is that true?
Well, here's the reality of all this. We vote together as senators or as House of Representatives people most of the time in Kansas. So I also voted with the Senate Majority Leader, who's a Republican, 87% of the time. And that's just how we are as Kansans. So it is not an example of anything that's that different. We in Kansas know how to work together, many of us, and that's what we've been doing. And that's what the majority of people have wanted, and we vote the same way. I think that's great.
All right, let's get down to some issues. You mentioned the health care issue, of course. It is one of the biggest. Do you support the ACA in its entirety?
The ACA was a very good start, but one of the challenges is it's not perfect. And so things that I think are working really well, one, protecting people with pre-existing conditions. I mentioned that earlier. And my goodness, in the middle of a pandemic, when we are being exposed and coming down with a virus that we don't even begin to know yet what potential long-term effects we might have from it, we need to be covered and protected. Of course, people love having their children able to stay on their plans up to age 26. And of course, people want to be covered for basic things like colonoscopies and mammograms and preventive care issues. Those are really important. But of course, it's not perfect. And so we need to build on it.
What are those?
I'm getting there.
Okay.
So one of the things we need to add is to be able to negotiate through Medicare with pharmaceutical companies so that we can lower drug costs. And that will, what goes through Medicare pretty much goes through everybody. That's how things end up happening. And so I was, again, very distressed. Roger Marshall voted against lowering prescription drug prices by saying, no, we cannot negotiate for those prices. And people need that to happen. What else can we do? We need to absolutely keep our private insurance in place and just come together and find out what's not working. I will tell you, I haven't heard any specifics from anybody about one thing they want eliminated from the Affordable Care Act. What they want is it built upon. That's what I hear.
So you don't have any specific tweaks as to how you would change it, but you do have tweaks as to how you would keep it the same with the pre-existing conditions. And
right, but point being is I'm ready to come to the table because, again, I think, I don't know everything there is to know about it yet because I've been in the state legislature and working on that. But we have to have people who are willing, who are capable, number one, and who are willing to listen and bring the voice of the people forward for what it is they want and need. So if there's specifics, I am ready to get to the table to work on it. I'm thinking right now, I'm wondering if it's part of the ACA, but like I heard from a woman today about a parent that has ALS and needs help because people with that disease maybe should be able to access their insurance, their life insurance, et cetera, because they're not going to live forever and need to be able to pay for their health care. If that needs to be part of it, maybe we need to move forward for that. But point being, we have to reduce costs in this country and make sure that all people are covered. And I have an opponent that wants to take away health care from people.
I'm doing an interview with him after this, so I'm sure he'd disagree. And in fact, he has said he is for pre-existing conditions to stay in place.
Yeah, it's funny, and he may say that, but he's voted repeatedly to take them away. And I think people have to have their record looked at. It is so, you can say anything you want, and he's doing that right now. Because even during a pandemic, he voted to take away protections for people with pre-existing conditions with nothing to take its place. So, the record speaks for itself.
All right. All right. Let's go to the Supreme Court. You have said that the Senate should not go ahead and nominate or appoint a Supreme Court justice. Why?
Because they set that precedent 4 years ago. Those were their words, and I believe in keeping your word and following precedent that a person sets. To make that statement back at that time when there were, 8 months before an election, and here we are in the middle of voting, and yet we have to rush this through. Supreme Court nominations are lifetime appointments. Our Supreme Court should not be politicized either. And sadly, that's what's happening. And that's why I'm standing opposed to it. They are moving ahead, but that is my opinion. I don't think they should be doing that.
What about expanding the court? A lot of candidates don't want to say whether they're for or against expanding the court, or as some call it, packing the court. What is your specific stand on that?
My specific stand is I do not support expanding the court.
That's very simple.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for that answer. Okay. Of course, some of the ads by your opponent target your votes on abortion. That seems to be a big topic in this year's campaign.
At least for my opponent it is, isn't it?
Yeah. As Republicans say on this point that you are anything but a moderate, because they point to one vote where you voted against a bill that sought to restrict abortion after the 22nd week of pregnancy. Why did you vote against that bill?
Because it had false science in it. And I'm a physician, and I will never vote for false science. I also will always support the private physician-patient relationship. And I do not believe that anybody in this country wants a politician in the middle of their very private, very difficult healthcare decisions. And let's quote my opponent right now. Remember when he was questioned about taking hydroxychloroquine? What was his comment? This is and should be between me and my doctor, and it's a private healthcare decision. And my exact point is, yes, women have been saying that for years, Congressman Marshall.
What would you say, though, to voters who want to vote for you but totally disagree on the 22-week, the fact that you voted against those restrictions after 22 weeks? What would you say to those voters?
I think, if they're truly interested, rather than just going to rhetoric, if they're truly interested, I am happy to give them the science, because sadly, the science was wrong. And again, we as physicians, at the least, need to make sure that our law follows science.
You also voted against requiring licensing for abortion clinics. Why did you do that?
Oh, very, very no. I voted against a bill that required excessive licensing that the legislature was not willing to apply to all healthcare facilities. If it is going to be put in place for the safety of patients, it absolutely should be applied across the board to all healthcare facilities. And they refuse to do it. We have wonderful law in place. My whole life message as a physician, as a legislature, is to be about safety for people. So we have a tremendous number of rules and laws in place to make sure people are safe, that these centers are well regulated, as we do for hospitals, et cetera. And as long as we're continuing with that, that's exactly what I support. So again, a perfect example of my opponent misrepresenting my record. I find it shameful.
All right, let's go to gun control because I promised you we'd get to issues. You voted for a bill in the Kansas legislature that would allow a judicial order just to seize a person's guns, a person's weapons. I know you're smiling, but explain why you voted for that bill.
Well, let's start with Kansas law. Do you know, does Kansas law allow law enforcement to take away weapons right now? Yes, it does right now. And what this bill did was put due process around that and give guidance to law enforcement when they take those weapons away. What are they to do with them? And why would they be taking them away? This would require a judicial order to say the person was at risk of harming him or herself or another person and would temporarily remove that weapon until the situation was under control, give guidance for how it's stored, and then get it back to the person. Right now, our current law doesn't have that process in place. And folks, wake up. Law enforcement can take your gun from you now. So I suggest, again, my opponent might get a little more familiar with Kansas and its laws.
All right. This bill would specifically let family members go to court to have their family members' weapon taken away from them.
Yes. And there is a similar law. There's a number of them around the state. You know, Ted Cruz actually supported this exact kind of law. And point being, places where it's been put to use, they've seen a significant reduction in gun violence in abuse situations. And they also have seen a reduction of suicides, which those should all be goals that we have.
Do you think America is systematically racist?
Well, that's quite a question. I will absolutely tell you this, that as a white woman myself, I need to acknowledge and say that I have not listened well enough to my sisters and brothers of color to understand and say, yes, they are being treated differently under our system of criminal justice, law enforcement, and that we need to do things to change that. So, you can never apply one thing to every single person, but we as a group, we need to recognize, we know that there are things that could be done like anti-bias training. That's just something that makes sense. Why not fund that? And of course, this is all about people are worried we're not going to fund the police. Of course, we're going to fund the police. We need them in our cities, et cetera, to help us, but they need to be able to do their job, and we need support systems in place so like mental health can be cared for rather than people ending up in the criminal justice system. And we need, like I said, things to actually prevent crime before it happens, like making sure we have really great early childhood, both care and education. We know that helps people stay out of trouble. So we've got a lot of work to do, and I really look forward to getting down to helping make those changes.
I think a lot of people would agree with the mental health aspect and preschool and for children, but where would you get the money for all this? Would you take it away? Would you be in favor of taking some away from the police department?
No, you can't take it away. You need to add to. So let's start right now in Kansas. How can we get more money for this? Expand Medicaid. We have $4 billion that we've missed out on that we already paid in taxes in this state that went to the feds and didn't come back. And one of the areas that we know it would have tremendously helped is our mental health care system, which so many of the people that need to be in it can't work because they haven't had the care. They can't work. They don't have health insurance. They can't work then. And it's just this continuous spiraling effect. So if we would do that, one, we'd get more healthcare workers to the state because we don't have enough. And it wouldn't just take care of people who would be on Medicaid. It would take care of all of us and help us get that care that we need. very important way to help get money to our state.
Congressman Marshall says expanding Medicaid would, quote, ultimately bankrupt our healthcare system while failing to meet the goals of providing good health care to our most vulnerable. How do you answer to that?
I am fascinated by that. Having served for years on the CanCare Oversight Committee in Kansas, which again, CanCare hasn't been perfect, but I hear story after story after example from people who come in and talk about the great benefit that having Medicaid to care for them and get them through times of health crisis matters to them. And also, even more importantly, prevent disease and take care of them before bad things happen. And there are 40 states that have expanded Medicaid in this country. Not one of them is saying, oh my gosh, never mind, we don't want this anymore. Every one of them wants to keep Medicaid expansion, if not help improve it even more. And I would just say he's wrong.
All right. You make a good point. We're only one of 12. Kansas is only one of 12 who has not voted to expand Medicaid.
And I want to be what I want to be really clear about is the people who are crying out for it most are our rural hospitals. And, the question comes up, how am I going to help people when I come from Johnson County? The answer is I have for years, because we need a strong healthcare system as well as a strong education system all throughout our state. And our rural hospitals have been begging for Medicaid expansion. And again, Roger Marshall just keeps saying, no, you shouldn't do this, no. And we need to listen. And we want health care. Our farmers, my goodness, if they get hurt, we don't want to have them having drive for miles and miles and end up permanently harmed or even not alive because we don't have that rural health care that we need. I stand with those ag and rural communities to get health care to the people.
All right. We only have about 2.5 more minutes, and I want to get back to the racism issue because it's been really, really big. Obviously, you know that. How should the federal government respond to the protests that have turned violent in this country?
Well, first of all, I don't support violence. Nobody should. But I absolutely support the First Amendment and the right to freely protest and express your opinion.
I think most people do, but how do you think the federal government should respond to the riots that have come out of the protests? If you think they should at all. We've got 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Well, here's the bottom line. I think, I started as a Republican. I am a believer in local control. And I believe that our local governments can handle their issues best. Now, if they ask for help and seek it from the federal level, then of course they should get support. But if they're not, they know the people best. Governance is always done best closest to the people. And, that just reminds me why I'm running. I want to help bridge those gaps between what happens in Washington and what happens at the very local level. It's so important for people to look to their own care, what's going on in their own towns first and foremost. So that's how I would answer that.
We've got about 1 minute left, or actually we only have 30 seconds. I'm going to give you the last 30 seconds to tell us why we should vote for you.
I love Kansas. I have served for 11 years as a voice of reason, an independent voice willing to stand up to party leadership if they're not doing what's right for Kansans, and will bring that exact same voice to Washington, the voice of the people of Kansas, ready to listen, look at data, follow science, collaborate, and move things forward. I am tired of the partisanship. We got to work together, and I'm ready to work for you, Kansas. I do ask for your vote.
Thank you very much, Senator Barbara Bollier. On that, we will end this. Thank you very much for giving us 30 whole minutes of your time.
Thank you so much. You know what? It is all good, and life is good in Kansas, isn't it? Let's keep it that way. Be well. Of course, wear your mask, as you know.
Our next half hour is devoted to Kansas Congressman Roger Marshall. He, of course, is the Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. Thank you so much for being here and for giving us a half an hour of your time to public television. Why do you think it's important to do this for public television?
Well, I think you have you're a listening audience that's very loyal to public television. We all have growing watching public television. So I think it's important that we communicate to everybody. And like I may have said once before, is that this is a little bit more or less biased than maybe some of the cable networks are in the evening.
Yeah. Your opponent says the Republicans, especially in the State House, don't really like public television. They've reduced funding for public television. What would you say to them? Do you think that should be?
Well, I certainly don't want to tell the State House in Topeka what to do, but we think it's at a great place, has done a great job, and I'm not sure the exact funding from the federal level, but we've never been opposed to it.
All right. You are your campaign somewhat attacks Barbara Bollier for switching parties. Why are you doing that? Why is the campaign doing that?
Well, look, she's masquerading as a moderate, as an independent, but she's not any of those. She actually has a very extreme voting record, and Kansans deserve to know that she's never seen a tax increase she didn't like, that she's voted with Democrats 90% of the time. She has an extreme voting record on abortion as well. So I think that Kansans deserve to know what her voting record is.
We're going to get to those issues later on, but I want to talk about the race first, and that the Republican Party has never had to put so much money, the National Republican Party, into a Kansas Senate race that we can recall. In fact, one of the PACs has put in about $12 million in the month of September and October. Why do you think Republican PACs have to do that for this race? It's tight. Why do you think that is so?
Well, because California is trying to buy this seat. California wants another senator. 80% of my opponent's money has come from out of state. She's received more money from California than from Kansans, more money from New York than from Kansans. So they're trying to level the playing field. At the end of the day, my opponent's going to have $30 or $40 million outspending us at least 5-1. But fortunately, we have a great grassroots. We're out there working hard. We've been in every county in Kansas probably 3 times, maybe more so. So we're going to win with the grassroots that Kansans are going to see through this lie.
According to a poll with the Kansas City Star, even some of your Republican experts say that you're underperforming with key Republican metrics. How do you answer to that? Why, if you feel you are, and how can you change that?
Well, look, I don't think we have much faith in polling. At the end of the primary, the experts thought we would win by 1 or 2 points, and we won by almost 15 points. I don't trust some of those metrics. All I can tell you is we just did a 28-stop, 2,000-mile tour from Colorado to Missouri, from Oklahoma, Nebraska, and I didn't see 2 of my opponent's yard signs, the big signs, and we saw hundreds of ours, that we ran out of yard signs 4 times now. So at the grassroots level, I think we're winning this.
We know your opponent is trying to win over moderate Republicans. How do you counter that? Because obviously she has ads which feature Republicans, who some of them are in the State House, some are not, and say, but I'm going to vote for Barbara Bollier. What would you say to them and other Republicans who may be more moderate than you?
Yeah, I think that number one, they should look at her voting record, an extreme voting record. Whether it's on protecting the Second Amendment, protecting the sanctity of life, that she has a very extreme voting record. You know, recently she said something to the effect that grabbing everybody's guns was actually a great, beautiful thing, an amazing thing was the exact words that she'd had. That she believes in late-term dismemberment abortion, that those are not consistent with Kansas values. Even when talking about Amy Coney Barrett, she wants to hold her to a religious test, which is unconstitutional. So she's the extreme person. Again, voted 90% of the time with Democrats. I've always represented Kansas values, and I'm always going to do that.
Fiscally, we're going to talk about abortion and gun control a little bit later, but fiscally, how do you differ from your opponent?
Well, look, the Democrat plan, and she left the Republican Party to become a Democrat after the Democrats released Medicare for All, as well as a Green New Deal. Joe Biden, who's the leader of her party, wants to raise your taxes and increase regulations. She's been bought and paid for by Chuck Schumer, that after investing $40 million in her, that they're going to be asking for her vote as well. So she's the tax and regulation party. I'm the keep your taxes low. The tax policies that we did allowed the average Kansas family to keep $2,000 more of their hard-earned money. When the Democrats were in control, they gave us Waters of the U.S., they gave us Dodd-Frank and the ACA, more regulations leading to consolidations of industry, which hurt Kansas consumers.
With the stimulus package that had already been given out and the one that is proposed, which is trillions of dollars for COVID relief, where would that money come from if the Republicans like you are talking about tax cuts?
Well, so regardless, that money is going to be borrowed from our grandchildren. And I think that's exactly the issue, that we borrowed several $1 trillion from our grandchildren to pay for the first COVID relief packages. And I think they've worked very well. The Paycheck Protection Program saved over 500,000 Kansas jobs. The unemployment insurance obviously helped thousands of Kansans as well. But I think the question is going forward, how much more do we need to borrow? But let me set the record straight. Despite the tax cuts, pre-COVID, despite the tax cuts, we had record revenue coming into the federal government because we had the greatest economy of my professional lifetime.
So you would be in favor of another stimulus package that the president has proposed?
So I'm in favor of another stimulus package, and what I would be in favor of is some more money for Paycheck Protection Program, for liability protection, something to do with unemployment insurance, some more money to keep our kids in school and safe as well, more money for vaccines as well. And again, my opponent voted against her own governor's corona stimulus bill. And she refuses to answer if she would support that legislation. But what I'm not in favor of is Nancy Pelosi's $2 trillion of debt that she wants to take on. I think that there is a compromised position where we're at now, probably in the $800 billion range.
Do you think there could ever be a compromise in Washington again?
You know, so you say that, but we did a farm bill that was a compromise, that was bipartisan. We fully funded the military. We've taken care of our veterans. We've done some incredible trade deals as well. And I realize once they're done, people forget, oh, that was bipartisan. Senator Roberts, Senator Moran did a great job with that farm bill. I think almost 90 of the senators voted in favor of it. So there is a way to get to right from both sides.
You're both doctors, both you and your opponent, and of course you differ on how to take care of the healthcare problem in our country. She claims that you voted against having pre-existing conditions be a mandate for insurance companies. What would you say to Kansans who have a pre-existing condition, but yet your vote would take insurance away from them? What would you say to them?
So that's a lie. That's absolutely a lie. Nobody wants to protect pre-existing conditions more than I do. You know, my own wife developed a pre-condition issue, as you talked about, pregnant with our second baby, an autoimmune problem she'll have the rest of her life. As an obstetrician, I had the most common pre-existing condition in the world, pregnancy, we had to take care of. Of course we're going to take care of pre-existing conditions, and our plan does better than the ACA. The ACA still left 28 million people without health care of any type. Listen if you would. Both parties want to repeal the ACA now. The Democrats want to replace it with government-controlled health care. I want to empower patients. I want patients to be in control of the insurance product that they have. What the Democrats are offering, what Joe Biden has signed off on, would take away health care from seniors, take away health care from veterans, and take away the health insurance you get through your job. So again, I want to promote choices, promote competitions. I want to empower patients.
But you had voted for some sort of bill that took away the mandate for pre-existing conditions. Would you do that again?
So I think that's a fib. I don't think that's a truth in that. I think it's a lie. I've always protected pre-existing condition. That is a myth that her campaign has put out. I have worked hard. No one has worked harder in Congress than I have to protect pre-existing conditions. And you could go to the Republican Study Committee website and see the legislation and our plan how to fix pre-existing conditions.
So you would continue to protect pre-existing conditions?
Absolutely. You know, the first time I went to Washington, D.C. We sat down with the Doc Caucus. That's 9 doctors in Congress. We meet every Wednesday at 7 a.m. We've spent more time figuring out a plan to protect pre-existing conditions maybe than any other single topic. So we're absolutely committed to taking care of pre-existing conditions.
You mentioned what you would replace the ACA with, so I won't ask that question. But Barbara Bollier's campaign, let's get to something different now. Well, it has to do with healthcare, is claiming that you had a part in closing down the nonprofit hospital in Great Bend and replacing it with a for-profit hospital in which you made $24 million. So I would ask you why the nonprofit closed and why you sold your company, your hospital, for $24 million. Did you really profit off that?
So those are both lies. Once again, both lies. The nonprofit hospital never closed, and I sold my interest in the hospital back to the doctors once I got elected so I wouldn't have any type of conflict of interest. So I didn't profit. That actually happened a couple years after I left. The reason we built our own hospital is this. I walked into a surgery one Monday morning, like I did every Monday morning, and I said hi to my patient. I looked at anesthesia, and I said, "You can go to sleep." And I looked up there, I didn't know who my anesthesia person was. And the same thing happened in the other 2 rooms. Our community hospital was given away to another big corporation out of town, and it was given away again and eventually to a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation that lost track of our community hospital. Mm-hmm. And when I had that problem with my anesthesia, I walked down to the hospital administrator's office and said, "What happened to our anesthesia? We had the best anesthesiologist in the country as far as I was concerned." And his answer was, "We found cheaper anesthesia." You know, we've had patients travel hundreds of miles to Great Bend to have their hip replaced, to have their baby, for me to do their infertility surgery. No one ever said they wanted cheap anesthesia. But that was just one example that they drove our business into the ground. It was a huge building, 250 beds it was made for, and they were averaging 17 inpatients. They left their customers. And when we built our new hospital, we had incredible results, incredible patient satisfaction. Our practices grew 15 to 30%. We became the largest taxpayer in town, so we were held by the local community for doing what we did.
Yet her campaign says you sold it and made $24 million off the hospital.
So that's the second lie, is that I sold my interest back to the doctors in 2016 when I got elected. The sale to KU, and I'm grateful, KU's doing a great job. They sold it to KU a couple years after I did. So these are just more lies. And I don't know about you, but once a person lies to me, I don't trust anything else they say.
Let's get to abortion, because your campaign has obviously made a big issue of abortion. Why have you made this such a big issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a very personal issue to me. You don't deliver 5,000 babies without thinking life is really important. And people ask me, what do you really miss about being an obstetrician? It's that moment, you deliver the baby's crying, and I get to hand that baby off to that new mom and dad for the first time. And that's just such a special feeling. And I never dreamed that I would have to go to Washington and fight harder to protect babies there than I did in the delivery room. So my opponent believes in abortion on demand, late-term dismemberment abortion. I believed in the sanctity of life. It is just that simple. This is a personal thing to me. I've developed a national reputation as a spokesperson for the pro-life community. As an obstetrician, people can't argue with my personal experiences. They can't argue with me that a patient that went to Planned Parenthood for a pregnancy test and they were scheduled for an abortion. So I'm always going to be unapologetically protecting of life.
But you say it's your personal thing, but yet would you be in favor of outlawing abortion in the country?
So Roe versus Wade is an issue that the Supreme Court needs to decide. As a senator, I'm always going to confirm, though, pro-life, constitutionalist judges with values that Kansans have. I don't want federal funding for abortions. I'm always going to do my best to protect life.
Would you be in favor? You say you're going to appoint pro-life
justices.
Justices, yes. So that means you'd be in favor of outlawing abortion in the country?
So I think that is a job for the Supreme Court to decide. I'm in favor of life, always standing up for life wherever I can.
All right, let's get to the Supreme Court. Why do you think it's important that Donald Trump push his nominee through before November 3rd? Why do you think that's important?
Well, first of all, history and precedent are on our side, that 17 times before in American history that we had a Supreme Court nominee in an election year, and the Senate majority is controlled by the same party that controls the White House. So precedent is on this side. And I think it's absolutely, this is a reason many people voted for Donald Trump. This is a reason that many people voted for Republican senators for such a time as this. And I think the real question would be is why the Democrats are so opposed. They're opposed to this because they want extreme justices that would rubber stamp their unconstitutional laws. Time and time again, I've seen legislation come from Nancy Pelosi and pass the House floor that attack our freedoms of religion and our freedoms of speech as well, our Second Amendment rights and the sanctity of life. So that's the real issue here, is that we want to make sure that we don't have a Senate majority that would pack the court with judges that would rubber stamp unconstitutional laws.
I think a Democrat would say, and in fact Barbara Bollier would say, what's good for the Republicans should be good for the Democrats, and the Republicans did the exact same thing, 7 years ago?
But it's not the exact same things. This is apples and oranges. She's an educated person. She should understand that in 2016, the party that controlled the Senate was not the same party as the president. You'd have to go back to the 1880s to find a time in history where that scenario happened and there was a justice confirmed. So it's truly apples and oranges, but the real issue is they want to pack the court. The Democrats want to pack the court with extreme judges.
Do you really think if the Senate goes Democratic that they will pack the court, that they will expand the Supreme Court? Do you really believe that would happen?
I do. But why won't they answer the question? Why won't Barbara Bollier answer that question? Why won't Joe Biden answer the question?
She did, in defense, she said she is not in favor of expanding the Supreme Court.
So on multiple occasions, I've seen her deny answering that question. So I take your word for it, but I'd have to see how she worded it. But multiple times she's refused to answer it, much like she waited till day number 95 of the Portland riots to condemn rioting and violence. That's not leadership. She doesn't represent Kansas values. She's an extremist.
Okay. Yesterday she did say that she would not be in favor. What comes of it if she would get into office?
Would she be willing to stand up to Chuck Schumer, who's invested $30 million in her?
Do you think, I'm going to ask you this because I asked Barbara Bollier this, do you think there's systematic racism in America?
I can't speak for what goes on in California or the East Coast, but I can speak for Kansas, that I don't see systemic racism, that I was raised to judge a person based upon their heart and based upon their actions. And all that being said, that if there's opportunity for improvement in any of our lives, then so be it. Let's all look in the mirror and see if there's an opportunity to improve in that area. I can tell you from my personal experiences that I hired 2 African Americans to be my partners as physicians. My kids, some of my very best friends were people of color, so I don't see it see it in Kansas.
Do you think we could do anything in terms of changing laws or that would fight racism?
I think that the laws are in place, and I think that that people need to look at their hearts and fix this if there is one. I think there's opportunities that maybe if there's any type of issue with our law enforcement officers, that I have supported legislation that would help address this potential issue. Issues that will allow more transparency, more accountability, more training. That I've sat down with the local law enforcement officers associations, the police, the sheriffs, the highway patrol, and they're already doing so many of the things. I'm proud that Kansas is one of 5 states that requires 40 additional hours of training every year as well. But I'm always going to stand up for law and order. The son of the police chief, I'm going to always make sure that our families, that our country is safe and secure.
All right, let's get to gun control. One of your ads claims that Barbara Bollier wants to take away all of our guns. Obviously, she said that's not so. Why does your ad say that?
So I'd encourage everybody to go to our website or our Facebook and see the video of her describing Australia and describing confiscating weapons as an amazing thing. and she's just giddy, happy about taking people's guns, that she has 100% voting records against gun rights, that she has 100% voting record of confiscating weapons, of doing anything against the gun. So she has an F- rating with the NRA, so she has a voting record that shows she's extreme, and then we're using her own words.
I think you might be referring to the law that she voted for that lets family members go to the court and say, you need to take away my family member's gun because he or she is dangerous. She said that's because of domestic violence. What would you say about that law and her voting for it?
Look, she has multiple times, every time there's been any type of attack on the Second Amendment, she's voted in favor of taking away our Second Amendment. You know, I had a young girl, like a 30-year-old girl, ask me a couple weeks ago. She said, I've never owned a gun. I don't ever plan on owning one. Why is the Second Amendment important to her? But the Second Amendment is what defends the First Amendment. It's the flagship. If we lose our Second Amendment, are they next going to come after our freedom of speech and our freedom of religion as well?
Are you for any modifications to gun control, or would you just leave it the way it is?
Yeah. I'm not in favor of any new laws on weapons. We've already done quite a bit of work in this area. That we did the Fix NICS legislation when Republicans controlled all three parts of the legislature. When the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House, right? And it closed loopholes in purchasing guns, some background checks, those types of things. And we gave them more monies to use to actually enforce the laws that we already have.
So you wouldn't even be in favor of banning assault weapons again, like was done several years ago in our country?
Yeah, you know, I just think the term assault weapon is a myth. I grew up around guns. A .22 rifle is every much an assault weapon as an AK-47. So I think it's a myth term that doesn't mean much, and I just don't know where you would draw the line.
Barbara Bollier says she voted for that law to save women and some men from being shot in domestic violence situations. Why isn't that law? Why would you have not voted for that law? Now, obviously, you're not in the State House, but I assume you wouldn't have voted for that law. Why wouldn't you have voted for that law?
Yeah, and really, I've not read the particulars of that law. It's a hypothetical, and the devil's always in the details. But we all have a right as well. What would happen if someone walked downtown to the court and said, hey, Roger Marshall's staff person is a danger to themselves and other, and they had their weapons? What is the recourse that person has is what I want to know.
All right. What about human-caused climate change? Do you believe there's any human cause in climate change?
Absolutely. Of course I do.
What would you do about what?
Yeah.
Because obviously, Republicans are known for allegedly not wanting to do anything about it. And
I think that's such a myth. I really think that is such a myth, and maybe I can dispel it. You know, as a young Boy Scout, we were taught to leave it better than we found it. My family, my kids and I planted over 20,000 trees that, thanks to innovation and conservation, America's carbon footprint is at a 25-year low. It's 10% less today than it was a decade ago. Not because of some type of laws written in Washington, D.C., but because of American innovation and conservation. So what I would do about it is exactly that, is to promote conservation and innovation. I spent a half hour this morning talking with Kansas State University about carbon capture. What can farmers be doing to recapture this carbon? But the Green New Deal, which my opponent joined the Democrat Party after they came up with the new Green New Deal.
She has said she wouldn't.
But the follow-up question is to be, what parts of it does she not support? Because I think that she still supports 90% of it, 95% of it, and she's pulled it, and therefore she's against it. But again, when Chuck Schumer comes to her vote, she's going to grab it. The Green New Deal, regardless, would be the end of Kansas agriculture, the end of Kansas oil and gas industry, and her party will push it through. If Chuck Schumer is the next Senate Majority Leader, then she and her party will push through the Green New Deal, and she'll vote for it.
So what's wrong with not eliminating fossil fuels, but making them less effective? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with a compromise?
Well, I think that's exactly what we're suggesting. So right now, Kansas, 38% of our electricity is made from wind energy. We went to natural gas. Solar energy is coming in right behind where the wind energy is. So it's happening. It's happening because that's customers that are demanding it happen, and because it's economical. So we've had lots of policy that have promoted wind energy and have promoted solar energy as well, helping those industries stand up on their 2 feet as well. But don't underestimate how important the oil and gas industry is to Kansas as well. And you know, our refinery, I grew up working in the refinery in El Dorado. That refinery probably 99% cleaner than it was before. The coal burning plants we have today, 99% cleaner. Kansas is blessed with so many natural resources, and one of them is a multitude of ability to generate electricity, and now we're able to export that as a product that Kansas is making money on.
Okay, you mentioned the Democratic-held Senate. So we've got about 3 more minutes. This race in Kansas is very, very tight. I just saw on a national news program today that Democrats are looking at it as a possibility. The polls show it's virtually neck and neck, some percentage points difference, but really the margin is not that great. What's wrong? Why should moderate Republicans vote for you instead of Barbara Bollier?
Yeah, I think we've already talked about that. My opponent is extreme. Her voting record is extreme. Her views are extreme. I'm running to make sure that our kids and grandkids have the same shot at the American dream that I've had. I'm running to keep your family safe, healthy, and secure. I'm running to bring jobs back to Kansas. I'm running to protect Kansas values. But you make my point. I'm asking you to go out today. The polls are open today. Go out and vote today, and I'm asking for your vote. I'm Roger Marshall, and I'm running for the United States Senate.
All right, we've got about 2 more minutes. Why do you think the Republican in this state, in this time, in the first time in 88 years, is having so much trouble being a shoo-in as a senator? Why do you think you're having trouble convincing everybody and making those polls go in your favor?
Yeah, again, I think the polls are wrong. I don't think we're struggling. I think that at the end of the day, we're going to have a really strong showing on November the 3rd, that if traditional Kansans get out and vote, we're going to have a significant victory, that the national media wants a narrative here, a narrative that doesn't really exist. And again, the polls were off 15 points in our primary. 2 years before that, 3 years before that, in a similar primary, they were 14 points off. So we'll see, but regardless, I need Republicans to go out and vote today. If you're a moderate, if you're an independent, I would appreciate your support as well. I'm going to keep your family safe and secure. I'm going to bring jobs back to Kansas and protect your values.
One of the big contentions and things I've heard back on email is they hesitate to vote for Barbara Bollier because they don't want a Democrat in the Senate. Otherwise, they may vote for Barbara Bollier because they don't want the Democrats to control the Senate. Do you think that should be a huge issue in this race? Barbara Bollier says we should vote for the candidate.
I think who controls the Senate is a huge issue. That if Barbara Bollier were elected, her first vote would be to make Chuck Schumer the majority leader. The next vote would be to give statehood to Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Next, they pack the court, and then they get rid of the Electoral College. So I think we have so much at stake that this isn't just the most important election of our lifetime, it's the most important election of our nation's lifetime.
We've got 5 more seconds. Say what you will.
God bless everybody. Susan, it's an honor to be on the stage here with you. You've had a great career. And just say hi to my mom and dad then. Thanks, everybody. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being with us.
You bet.
We hope this last hour has answered some questions you may have about the all-important Kansas Senate race. In the meantime, we encourage you all to get out and vote. I'm Susan Peters. Have a good evening.